We stand before the Great Pyramid, its massive silhouette etched against the desert sky, a mountain of limestone and granite that has endured for more than 4,000 years. The tale most of us know begins with a king. Khufu, pharaoh of Egypt's 4th dynasty, is said to have conceived a vision of eternity. Around 2600 BCE, he commanded that a tomb unlike any other be built, one that would rise higher than any monument of man, a stairway to the heavens that would ensure his soul's safe passage into immortality. Close your eyes and picture the scene as textbooks describe it. Tens of thousands of workers gather on the plateau. Some are skilled artisans, stonecutters, and engineers. Others are peasants, conscripted from villages along the Nile. They toil under the burning sun, hauling blocks of stone on wooden sledges, dragging them across the sand with ropes that bite into their hands. Overseers shout commands. The air is filled with the clatter of chisels, the groan of timber, and the rhythm of human effort. Engineers, so the story goes, devised an ingenious solution to the problem of height. They built immense ramps of mud brick and rubble, stretching for miles, curling around the growing pyramid like a serpent. Up these ramps, block by block, the monument rose. Copper chisels cut the stone, levers shifted it into place, and sheer determination lifted Egypt's greatest king into the sky. It is a vision of human triumph, a civilization at its peak, harnessing labor and willpower to create a wonder of the world. And it is a story repeated so often, so confidently, that it feels like truth. Schoolchildren memorize it. Tourists hear it from guides who gesture toward the towering stones and speak of Khufu's ambition. The official narrative offers a comfort that the pyramids are monuments not of mystery, but of humanity itself, a reminder of what people can achieve when driven by faith and power. But beneath this neat explanation lies silence. The workers themselves left us no words, no songs, no journals of their task. Khufu carved his name in no grand inscriptions upon the pyramid's walls. The ramps, so essential to the tale, are nowhere to be seen. And when we look closer, when we measure the stones, the angles, the alignment to the stars, a question stirs. Could the tools and methods of the 4th dynasty truly account for all that stands before us? For centuries, the official story has reigned unchallenged. It paints the Great Pyramid as a tomb, a royal boast, a feat of manpower and primitive technology. Yet the stones themselves seem to whisper a different tale. As the desert wind brushes across their surface, they invite us to look deeper, to set aside what we've been told, and to consider the possibility that the truth is not so simple. The official story is where history begins, but it may not be where it ends. The desert stretches silent and endless, but nothing dominates it like the Great Pyramid. From afar, it looks like a mountain born of geometry, its sides sloping at an angle so precise that even in its weathered state, the lines seem deliberate, eternal. Step closer, and the immensity overwhelms you. Its base covers 13 acres, enough to fit entire city blocks within its footprint. Each side once shone with casing stones, polished smooth, reflecting the sun with such brilliance that the pyramid appeared as a star fallen to earth. Imagine standing at the base, craning your neck until your gaze reaches its vanished capstone. Once, it soared to a height of 146 meters, taller than any structure humanity built until the medieval cathedrals of Europe. For nearly 4,000 years, no tower, no spire, no monument exceeded it. Its presence was unrivaled, a statement carved not in words, but in stone, daring time itself to erase it. Now, focus on the stones themselves. 2.5 million blocks, some weighing as much as 15 tons, stacked with a precision that defies comprehension. Run your hand along the ancient joints, and you will find seams so tight that a sheet of paper cannot slip between them. Modern masons with diamond tools and lasers struggle to replicate such accuracy, yet here it stands, achieved supposedly with copper chisels and pounding stones. The foundation is a marvel in itself. Across a span of 230 meters, the base is leveled with a variance of less than 2 centimeters. Engineers today, armed with lasers, struggle to achieve that degree of flatness on projects a fraction of this size. And then there is the alignment. Each side of the pyramid faces almost perfectly to true north, deviating by less than 1/20th of a degree. Compasses, subject to the Earth's shifting magnetic field, wobble more than that. Yet 4,500 years ago, someone fixed this monument in place with an accuracy that seems more than human. Step inside, and the precision continues. The grand gallery rises like the inside of a cathedral, its stones stacked in corbelled layers that soar upwards with balance and symmetry. The king's chamber, hewn from massive blocks of granite quarried hundreds of miles away, resonates with acoustic properties so exact that some believe it was tuned like an instrument. The builders were not guessing. They were calculating. Every angle, every joint, every shaft seems purposeful, as though the pyramid itself were a machine, its parts fitted together with an understanding of forces and materials far beyond its age. This is not the rough labour of peasants dragging stone. This is not the haphazard stacking of blocks. This is artistry wedded to mathematics, scale bound to precision, the impossible made real. And as you stand in its shadow, you feel not only the weight of stone, but the weight of mystery pressing upon you. For this monument does not merely impress, it unsettles. It makes us wonder whether the story we have been told can truly account for what the stones themselves reveal. The official tale tells us the pyramid was built with nothing more than ropes, wooden sledges, and copper chisels. At first glance, it is a story of perseverance, of human hands shaping stone through sheer determination. But when you lean closer, when you study the evidence with the same care the builders themselves must have used, the story begins to fray. The tools do not match the task. Copper, the metal most often cited, bends easily under pressure. Strike it against hard limestone and it deforms. Strike it against granite and it fails almost immediately. Yet inside the Great Pyramid, we find granite beams weighing 70 tons, cut and transported from Aswan, more than 800 kilometers away. These blocks are fitted so precisely that their surfaces gleam with a polish like glass. Imagine attempting such a feat with copper. The idea feels not only improbable, but absurd. And then there are the casing stones, the smooth white limestone blocks that once covered the pyramid's surface, shining so brightly they earned it the name Ichet, the glorious light. These stones were cut and set with joints of astonishing fineness, angled to create a smooth slope that rose more than 140 meters into the sky. With primitive tools, how could such flawless geometry be achieved on a scale so immense? The ramps often described as the solution raise questions of their own. To lift blocks to the pyramid's summit, ramps would have needed to stretch for miles, requiring more material than the pyramid itself. Yet no remains of these colossal structures have ever been found. The desert keeps secrets, but it does not erase millions of tons of rubble. Where are the scars of this effort, the footprints of an endeavour so vast? Consider, too, the logistics. To complete the pyramid in 2 decades, as some propose, workers would need to cut, transport, and place 1 block every 2 minutes, day and night, without pause, for 20 years. Not a single delay, not a single error. The math alone feels impossible, a demand beyond even modern construction crews working with cranes, trucks, and steel. Yet, we are told it was done with ropes and sweat, with sledges dragged across sand. Walk inside the Grand Gallery, and the inconsistencies deepen. The soaring walls are polished smooth, their corbelled layers fit with such care that even centuries of shifting earth have left them unbowed. The king's chamber resounds with acoustic properties that suggest deliberate design. These features are not accidents born of crude labour. They are the fingerprints of knowledge, of methods that exceed the simple narrative of primitive tools. The more we look, the more the story collapses under its own weight. The chisels bend, the ramps vanish, the numbers defy reason. What remains is the stone itself, silent, exact, and unmoving, as though it were telling us that the true story lies not in the tools we imagine, but in a mastery we no longer understand. For centuries, the official story of the pyramids remained unchallenged. Egyptologists painted Khufu as the master builder, his labourers as the hands that reshaped the desert into eternity. But as explorers, engineers, and scientists began to examine the pyramid with sharper tools and keener eyes, the cracks in this story became harder to ignore. Doubts, quiet at first, began to whisper from the very stones. In the early 19th century, surveyors set their instruments against the Great Pyramid's sides and were astonished. The alignment to true north was almost perfect, more accurate than many modern buildings. How could a Bronze Age society, without compasses or telescopes, orient such a vast monument with such exactness? The question hung in the air like desert dust, unsettling those who believed the old tale. Later, geologists looked at the granite beams inside the king's chamber. Each weighed more than 70 tons and had been transported from Aswan, nearly 500 miles to the south. How, they asked, could a culture without wheels, without iron, and with only boats of reed and wood move such monoliths across river and desert? The logistics seemed impossible, yet the beams were there, immovable proof that it had somehow been done. By the 20th century, engineers joined the conversation. They ran the numbers. The rate at which stones would need to be cut, hauled, and placed to finish the pyramid in Khufu's 20-year reign. 1 block every 2 minutes, they calculated, without interruption, without failure, for decades. Even with modern machinery, such speed strains belief. For workers armed only with sledges and ropes, it borders on the miraculous. Archaeologists, too, began to notice an unsettling pattern. If the Great Pyramid was the culmination of Egyptian skill, why did later pyramids decline in quality? The Bent Pyramid, built just before Khufu's reign, nearly collapsed under its own weight. Later, pyramids crumbled into rubble, their geometry less refined, their construction hurried and flawed. Knowledge does not usually fade so abruptly. Civilizations build upon their successes. Yet here, it seemed, genius had appeared fully formed, only to vanish again. Even within Egyptology, small cracks appeared. Inscriptions naming Khufu inside the pyramid were scant, limited to hidden graffiti in a chamber discovered in the 19th century. No grand carvings, no walls filled with hymns or spells, no declarations of divine power. For a king supposedly obsessed with his own immortality, this silence was troubling. It left some to wonder if Khufu had built the pyramid at all, or if he had merely claimed it. The more the experts looked, the more the mystery deepened. Their questions did not destroy the official story, but they eroded its certainty, like wind slowly wearing down stone. And as the doubts grew, a bolder thought began to take shape. A thought too strange to be spoken aloud in lecture halls, but impossible to ignore beneath the shadow of the pyramid itself. The Great Pyramid looms above the desert, a riddle in stone. We have walked around its base, marvelled at its vastness, and measured its perfection. We have tested the official story, weighed the chisels and the ramps, and found them wanting. We have listened to the doubts of geologists, engineers, and explorers, each voice chipping away at the neat tale of Khufu's mighty tomb. And now, as the night settles over Giza and the wind carries whispers across the plateau, we are left with the question that has haunted dreamers for generations. What if humans did not build the pyramids alone? Imagine for a moment that the Egyptians were not the creators, but the inheritors. Perhaps the pyramid was already ancient when Khufu reigned, a relic of a forgotten people who understood geometry, astronomy, and engineering in ways we can scarcely imagine. Some suggest this civilization perished in a great catastrophe, a flood, a shifting climate, a disaster that swept their cities away but left behind monuments of stone. The Egyptians, finding these structures, claimed them, repurposed them, and wove them into their own story. History, after all, is often written not by the builders, but by the survivors. Others take the thought further still. The pyramid's precision, its alignment to the stars, its mathematical constants, pi, the golden ratio, the very dimensions of the earth itself, seem almost like a language, a message carved into stone. What if that message was never meant for the people of Khufu's time at all, but for us? A time capsule designed to survive millennia, to whisper across ages to anyone advanced enough to read it. Could the pyramid have been built not as a tomb, but as a beacon, a machine, a monument meant to outlast civilizations and remind us that we are not the first to walk this path of knowledge? And then there are the wilder whispers, the ones that slip into myth and legend. Ancient astronaut theorists imagine visitors from the stars, sharing their knowledge with early humanity, leaving behind monuments that point to the heavens. The Great Pyramid, they say, may be more than stone. It may be a marker, a signal, a reminder that we are part of a greater story that stretches far beyond Earth. Skeptics dismiss such ideas as fantasy, but the stones remain, silent, exact, enduring. And silence can be louder than denial. So we linger in the shadow of the impossible monument, torn between what we've been taught and what our eyes can see. Perhaps the truth is not one or the other, but something in between. Humans striving, guided by knowledge we no longer possess, or aided by a force we cannot name. The pyramid does not answer. It asks. It asks us to look closer, to question, to imagine. As you drift deeper into the night, let the image of the pyramid stay with you. A mountain of stone, older than memory, patient as time itself. It stands not as a conclusion, but as an invitation, a challenge to wonder if the hands that built it were not entirely human, and if the past we think we know is only a fragment of a far greater mystery. The Great Pyramid is silent. No inscriptions tell us its purpose. No cartouches proclaim its builder. And yet it speaks, not in words, but in numbers. Its very dimensions form a language carved into limestone and granite, a language so universal it transcends cultures, centuries, even planets. At the heart of this language are two of the most mysterious constants in mathematics: pi, the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter, and phi, the golden ratio, a number that seems woven into the fabric of life itself. Stand at the base of the pyramid and walk its length. Each side measures about 230.4 meters. Multiply that by 4, and you have a perimeter of roughly 921.6 meters. Now compare it to the pyramid's original height, 146.6 meters. Divide perimeter by height, and you arrive at 2 heights, accurate to within less than 0.1%. This is not a coincidence. It is a code written in stone, an eternal whisper of geometry that was not formally defined until thousands of years later. But the pyramid does not stop at pi. Hidden in its slope, at an angle of about 51.8 degrees, lies the golden ratio, phi 1.618. Compare half the base length to the pyramid's height, and the ratio aligns with phi's infinite elegance. The same number appears in the spirals of shells, the branching of trees, the proportions of the human body, the orbits of planets. It is a constant that seems to stitch the universe together. Somehow, impossibly, the builders of the Great Pyramid encoded it in their monument. Pause and let that sink in. A society said to rely on copper chisels and stone hammers produced a monument that encodes the same numbers that drive modern physics, architecture, and art. To stumble upon one constant might be luck. To embed both with such precision feels deliberate, as though the builders were sending a message beyond their own time, beyond their own culture. Mainstream Egyptologists often dismiss these ratios as coincidence, the accidental product of trial and error. But the accuracy challenges such an explanation. The pyramid does not approximate these numbers loosely. It mirrors them with a precision so fine that even a small deviation in construction would have erased the effect. This was not accident. This was design. Imagine the builders standing on the plateau, aligning their structure not only with the stars, but with the hidden mathematics of the cosmos itself. They left no books, no blueprints, no equations scratched onto papyrus. Instead, they carved their knowledge into stone, on a scale that would endure for millennia. As you let your mind drift, the pyramid becomes more than a tomb, more than a monument. It becomes a message in the language of numbers, a message that says, we knew. We knew the constants that bind the universe, and we left them here, waiting for you to find. Look to the heavens, and you begin to see another layer of the pyramid's design. It is not only a mountain of stone, but a compass, a calendar, a mirror of the sky itself. Its 4 sides face the cardinal directions with uncanny accuracy, aligned to true north with an error of less than 1/20th of a degree. Even today, with satellites and lasers, such precision is rare. Yet here it stands, aligned not to the shifting magnetic pole, but to the rotation of the stars themselves. Close your eyes and imagine the builders, thousands of years ago, watching the night sky. The Milky Way stretches overhead, Orion rises in the east, and the North Star shines faintly above the horizon. With no telescopes, no sextants, they measured the heavens with a skill that seems to outpace their age. To align a structure of this scale to true north requires an understanding of Earth's axial rotation, the slow drift of the stars, known as precession. It is a cycle that takes nearly 26,000 years to complete. And yet, the pyramid is set so perfectly that it reflects not just the stars of its own time, but the stars of ages past. Consider the shafts that extend from the king's chamber, narrow tunnels angled upward into the sky. One points toward Orion's belt, the celestial home of Osiris, god of rebirth. Another points toward the northern stars, symbols of eternity to the ancient Egyptians. These alignments are not symbolic guesses. They are precise, calculated, fixed to the positions of stars as they appeared more than 4,000 years ago. Some argue they match even older skies, suggesting the pyramid was planned during an age long before Khufu's reign. The placement of the pyramids themselves adds to the mystery. Viewed from above, the three great pyramids of Giza align with the three stars of Orion's belt. The match is not perfect, but it is close enough to suggest intention, especially when one considers the relative sizes. The smallest pyramid corresponds to the faintest star, slightly offset, just as it appears in the sky. Did the builders map the heavens onto the earth, turning the Giza plateau into a reflection of the night sky? Across the ancient world, we see echoes of this same pattern. At Stonehenge, the stones align with the solstices. At Teotihuacan in Mexico, pyramids mirror the motion of the Pleiades. At Angkor Wat, temples trace the dance of Venus. Again and again, humanity has sought to anchor the heavens in stone. The Great Pyramid may be the grandest example, a cosmic compass built not only to honor the gods, but to preserve the very knowledge of the stars. As you drift deeper into the thought, imagine lying beneath the desert sky, the pyramid rising above you, its angles pointing silently to Orion and the pole star. It is as though the builders wanted us to remember not only who they were, but where we are, suspended between earth and heaven, forever part of the same cosmic design. The pyramid is more than stone. Hidden in its dimensions is a map of the world, as though the builders carved not just a monument, but a model of the earth itself. When modern surveyors measured its base, its height, its perimeter, they discovered numbers that seemed too precise, too deliberate to be chance. Begin with the height. Originally, before erosion and the loss of its capstone, the Great Pyramid stood 146.6 meters tall. Multiply that height by 43,200, a curious number tied to the precession of the equinoxes, and you arrive at 356,000 meters. That figure is astonishingly close to the polar radius of the Earth, 356,000 meters. Within less than a fraction of a percent, the pyramid's height encodes the very radius of our planet. Now, walk around its base. Each side measures about 230.4 meters. The total perimeter is roughly 921.6 meters. Multiply that by the same factor, 43,200, and the result is 39,916,800 meters, a near-perfect match for Earth's equatorial circumference. In the proportions of this silent monument, we find the shape of the world itself, scaled down in stone. How could a civilization 4,500 years ago, with no satellites, no GPS, no knowledge of a spherical Earth in their surviving texts, achieve such precision? The official story cannot explain it. Ancient Egyptians, we are told, measured land with ropes and surveyed fields by the floodwaters of the Nile. Yet here, in the desert plateau, stands a monument that reflects planetary dimensions to an accuracy that rivals modern instruments. Was this accident, or was it intention? The number 43,200 itself deepens the mystery. It is not arbitrary. It is a factor directly tied to the cycle of precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis, which takes 25,920 years to complete. Divide that great cycle into smaller parts, and 43,200 emerges as a key multiple. It is as though the builders not only knew the size of the Earth, but also its motion through the heavens. Such knowledge should have been centuries, even millennia beyond their reach. Some argue the measurements are coincidence, the product of ratios that happen to line up. But coincidence strains belief when it repeats with such precision. The pyramid does not vaguely suggest the Earth's shape. It encodes it directly, in numbers so exact that even slight errors in construction would have erased the pattern. To embed such constants is to speak a language of geometry that requires both purpose and knowledge. Close your eyes and imagine the builders standing on the plateau, the stars wheeling overhead, the Nile flowing below. They raise their monument not just to a king, but to the planet itself, embedding in its stones a scale model of the Earth, a reminder of where we stand in the cosmos. The Great Pyramid is not only a tomb, not only a temple. It is a mirror of the world, a message in stone that says, "We knew the Earth, we measured it, and we left its dimensions here for those who would one day remember." The pyramid does not speak in hieroglyphs. Its walls carry no tales of kings or battles, no hymns to gods, no records of daily life. It speaks instead in the quiet, eternal voice of mathematics, a language that needs no translation, no culture, no era. A circle is a circle, whether drawn in sand or calculated by satellites. A ratio is the same, whether whispered by a priest in the desert or written by a physicist in a laboratory. Numbers do not age, and in this, they are the perfect carriers of knowledge across time. When we look at the Great Pyramid, we find these numbers everywhere. Pi emerges in the relationship between its perimeter and height. The golden ratio reveals itself in its slope. Earth's radius and circumference appear encoded in its scale. These are not the marks of chance, but of intention. If words can be lost, if languages can fade, mathematics endures. Was this the builder's goal? To leave behind a message in a form that could never be forgotten. Pause and imagine this thought. If a civilization wished to send knowledge across millennia, what medium would they choose? Papyrus crumbles, clay tablets shatter, even stone carvings erode in wind and sand. But geometry carved into a mountain of stone, proportions so vast they cannot be missed, that endures. The pyramid itself becomes a message, a book written in ratios and angles, waiting for eyes capable of reading it. The universality of mathematics suggests something even greater. If humans can read these numbers thousands of years after their carving, might not others beyond Earth also understand? Pi is not an Egyptian number. Phi is not bound to Nile or desert. They are constants of the universe, appearing in the spirals of galaxies as well as seashells, in the curves of rivers as well as the orbits of planets. To encode them in stone is to write in a language that any intelligence, human or otherwise, could one day recognize. Mainstream scholars often resist such ideas, insisting the pyramid's proportions are the byproduct of practical choices, not intentional design. Yet, the precision argues otherwise. To stumble accidentally into pi and phi with such accuracy is like writing poetry without meaning to, composing music without realizing you've struck a perfect chord. The numbers are too precise, the design too exact, to dismiss as coincidence. So perhaps the pyramid is more than a tomb, more than a monument. Perhaps it is a message. not to the people of Khufu's time, but to all who would come after. A declaration that knowledge existed here, a seed of universal truth planted in stone. As you let your mind wander, imagine the pyramid glowing once more in its polished casing, gleaming beneath the sun by day and the stars by night. It stands as a beacon, not of words or names, but of mathematics itself, a reminder that some truths are eternal, and that whoever built this monument wanted us to know them. Stand once more in the shadow of the Great Pyramid, and feel its silent weight pressing against time itself. We have traced the numbers hidden in its form: pi, phi, the dimensions of the Earth, alignments to the stars. These are not the crude approximations of chance. They are deliberate, precise, intentional. And so the question arises: could such knowledge truly have come from the hands of Bronze Age builders, armed only with ropes and copper chisels? Or did it come from somewhere beyond their reach? Imagine for a moment a forgotten civilization, one erased from memory by catastrophe. Perhaps they lived thousands of years before Egypt's first dynasties, their cities long since swallowed by rising seas or shifting sands. They measured the earth, studied the heavens, and encoded their knowledge in monuments that would endure even when their names did not. The Egyptians, inheriting this legacy, may have claimed it as their own, unaware of the true origin of the structures that rose above them. Could the pyramid be the last surviving whisper of an age long vanished? Others see the pyramid not as inheritance, but as guidance. What if the builders did not discover pi and phi, but were taught? Across myths and legends, from Sumer to the Andes, from the Pacific Islands to the deserts of Africa, there are stories of gods or teachers descending from the sky. They bring knowledge of agriculture, of astronomy, of architecture. They vanish as suddenly as they appear, leaving behind only myths and monuments that seem too advanced for their time. Could the Great Pyramid be one of these gifts, a lesson carved in stone from beings who walked briefly among us? Consider again the universality of the message. Mathematics is not cultural, it is cosmic. To write in numbers is to speak across worlds. If another intelligence wished to leave behind proof of contact, how better than to inscribe the constants of the universe into a monument that could not be erased? A message not to the Egyptians alone, but to all of humanity, stretching forward through millennia until our science was advanced enough to notice. Skeptics dismiss such thoughts as fantasy. They argue for coincidence, for accident, for the triumph of trial and error. But the silence of the pyramid resists such comfort. No inscriptions declare its purpose. No records describe its construction. It stands alone, stripped of context, demanding interpretation. And when we interpret, the numbers keep pointing outward, to the earth, to the stars, to the universe itself. As the desert night deepens, imagine the pyramid glowing under the moonlight, its angles reaching for Orion, its proportions whispering secrets of pi and phi. Perhaps it is human genius alone that built it. Perhaps it is a relic of a forgotten age. Or perhaps it is something more, a message from beyond, waiting patiently in stone for us to understand. And as you drift into thought, the question lingers: could the knowledge carved into the Great Pyramid truly be of human origin, or is it the echo of something greater, something that once touched our world and left behind a monument to eternity? Beneath the endless Egyptian sky lies a guardian carved from stone, the Great Sphinx of Giza, Half lion, half man, it crouches on the desert plateau, its gaze fixed eternally to the east, watching the sun rise day after day for thousands of years. Its body is scarred by time, its face weathered and broken, its nose lost to history. Yet the true mystery of the Sphinx is not what we see on the surface, but what whispers from the very stone from which it was cut. Look closely at the body of the Sphinx, and you will see deep vertical grooves, channels worn into its flanks as though by streams of water. These are not the marks of wind-blown sand, which etches stone in horizontal lines. They are patterns of rainfall, of water flowing down the creature's sides over long centuries. And here lies the paradox. The Sphinx has sat in the desert for more than 4 millennia, a land where rain is rare and fleeting. To carve such deep water-worn scars, the climate must have been very different. A climate that ended thousands of years before Khufu, long before Egypt's first dynasties rose. In the 1990s, geologist Robert Schoch of Boston University studied these erosional patterns. He concluded that the Sphinx must be far older than conventionally believed, perhaps carved as early as 7,000 to 9,000 BCE, when heavy rains last fell on the Giza Plateau. If true, this would push the origins of the Sphinx back into the Stone Age, long before the Egyptians of history had developed writing, agriculture, or organized kingdoms. Could a culture capable of carving the largest monument of its kind have existed then, only to vanish, leaving behind no record but this silent guardian? Mainstream Egyptologists resist the theory, clinging to the narrative that the Sphinx was built in Khafra's reign around 2500 BCE. They point to inscriptions nearby and argue that the evidence is circumstantial. But the stone itself seems to tell a different tale. The weathering patterns are not speculative. They are carved into the very body of the monument, a geological record written in limestone. The Sphinx does not lie. If the Sphinx truly predates the pharaohs, then it is a relic of a forgotten civilization, a culture advanced enough to create a monument of this scale, yet lost to history. Perhaps it once stood as a symbol of their power, their mythology, their knowledge. Perhaps the Egyptians who came after found it already ancient, already eroded, and claimed it as their own, reshaping its face to resemble their king. Close your eyes and imagine the Giza Plateau not as desert but as savanna, green with grasses, rivers flowing, rains falling. In that distant age, long before our recorded history, hands unknown carved the body of a lion into the living rock. They left no words, no names, only stone. And as millennia passed, the rains ceased, the desert returned, and the monument was buried in sand, until the Egyptians rediscovered it, perhaps as mystified as we are today. The Sphinx whispers of water, of age, of a world we have forgotten. It may be the oldest riddle on earth, crouching silently in the sand, asking us to remember what history has chosen to forget. High on a hill in southeastern Turkey lies a place that rewrote history the moment it was uncovered, Göbekli Tepe. From the surface, it once looked like nothing more than a mound of earth, a gentle rise above the landscape. But buried beneath that hill was a secret, circles of massive stone pillars, some carved with animals, abstract symbols, and mysterious figures. Archaeologists began to excavate in the 1990s, and what they found challenged the very foundations of human history. Carbon dating revealed that Göbekli Tepe was built more than 11,000 years ago, around 9600 BCE. That is thousands of years before Stonehenge, thousands of years before the pyramids, even thousands of years before agriculture was thought to have begun. By all accounts, humanity at that time was still in the Stone Age, living in small bands of hunter-gatherers, without permanent settlements, without advanced tools, without the organization to create anything of such scale. And yet, here was Göbekli Tepe, intricate, immense, deliberate. The pillars stand up to 6 meters tall, weighing as much as 10 tons each. They are arranged in circles, carefully placed, with central monoliths looming above their companions like guardians. Many are carved with reliefs of lions, vultures, scorpions, and serpents, symbols whose meanings remain hidden. These were not crude attempts. The art is elegant, the geometry deliberate. Whoever built this site was not stumbling blindly into architecture. They knew what they were doing. Mainstream archaeology has struggled with this discovery. How could hunter-gatherers, supposedly simple and nomadic, create a temple complex that required hundreds of workers, organization, and skill? Some suggest Göbekli Tepe itself gave birth to civilization, that the need to build such monuments drove people to settle, farm, and invent writing. But others see it differently. Perhaps Göbekli Tepe was not the beginning of civilization, but the remnant of one already advanced, one that had survived a cataclysm and left behind traces in stone. And Göbekli Tepe is not alone. In South America, the megalithic walls of Sacsayhuaman near Cusco fit stones together so precisely that even today no blade can slip between them. In Baalbek, Lebanon, stones weighing more than 1,000 tons form the foundations of ancient temples. In Japan, off the coast of Yonaguni, a submerged complex of steps and terraces suggests human design, in a time when the sea was lower, long before recorded history. These sites, scattered across the globe, whisper the same unsettling idea, that long before Egypt, long before Mesopotamia, there were cultures capable of building in ways we struggle to comprehend. Cultures that left behind no written words, no chronicles of their power, only monuments in stone. Close your eyes and picture the people of Göbekli Tepe. Thousands of years before the pyramids, they gathered beneath the stars, raising monoliths in silence, carving their animals into pillars that would endure the ages. They left no names, no kings, no dates, only proof that humanity's story is older, stranger, and far more mysterious than we were taught. Göbekli Tepe stands as a reminder that the past is not a straight line, but a puzzle, with pieces scattered across continents and ages. And some of those pieces suggest that what we call the beginning may not have been the true beginning at all. Far to the east of Egypt, beyond deserts and mountains, lies an island where the sea hides a mystery of its own. Off the coast of Yonaguni, Japan's southernmost island, divers discovered what appeared at first to be nothing more than an unusual rock formation. But as they swam deeper, the sea revealed something astonishing. Terraces, stairways, and great blocks of stone that seemed to form the remnants of a sunken city. The structure is vast, stretching more than 70 meters long and rising 25 meters high from the seabed. Divers swim along sharp-angled steps, platforms that look as if they were cut by hand, and walls that rise in straight lines, their edges too precise to be the product of nature alone. Some surfaces bear marks that resemble carvings, while others form geometric shapes that seem deliberate, purposeful. The currents whisper through the ruins, carrying the question, is this natural geology sculpted by the ocean? Or is it the work of human hands, now drowned by the rising sea? Mainstream geologists often argue for the former, pointing to the fracturing of sandstone and the erosive power of waves. But others, including divers and researchers who have studied the site closely, insist that the symmetry, the scale, and the arrangement of its forms speak of design, not accident. If Yonaguni is indeed man-made, then it would have been built more than 10,000 years ago, when sea levels were lower and the plateau lay above the waves. That date places its construction in the final days of the last ice age, a time when glaciers melted and oceans rose, swallowing coastlines across the world. Could Yonaguni be a remnant of a civilization erased by the sea, its memory washed away while its stones remain? It would not stand alone. Across the globe, whispers of sunken cities rise from the depths. Off the coast of India, near the Gulf of Cambi, sonar surveys have revealed structures buried beneath the silt, stretching for miles, older than any known civilization of the region. In the Mediterranean, legends tell of cities lost to earthquakes and waves. Even Plato, in his dialogues, spoke of Atlantis, a great civilization swallowed by the sea in a single night. Perhaps these are only stories, coincidences, the human tendency to find patterns in stone and myth. Yet, when we see Yonaguni's terraces, its stairways descending into the deep, it is hard not to imagine footsteps once echoing on those steps, voices carrying across plazas now drowned in silence. Close your eyes and drift with the current. Imagine walking through a city, not under sky, but under sea, its walls carved from living rock, its streets now paths for fish and coral. The waves may have buried its people, erased their names, and silenced their histories. But the stones remain, whispering of a world that lived before ours. Yonaguni reminds us that the ocean is both cradle and grave of civilizations. If these stones are truly human, then our story stretches back far deeper than we have been taught, into an age when the world itself was reshaped by water. Across myths, ruins, and forgotten stones, a common thread appears. The idea that long ago the world was struck by a cataclysm so great it shattered civilizations and erased their memory. The Egyptians spoke of a time before the flood, when gods walked the earth. The Sumerians told of kings who ruled for thousands of years, their reigns ending when waters swallowed the land. The Bible recounts Noah and his ark, while Plato described Atlantis vanishing in a single night of fire and waves. These are not isolated stories. They echo across continents, from Native American traditions of a world cleansed by fire and flood, to the myths of India, where cycles of destruction and renewal stretch back into eternity. Again and again, cultures separated by oceans tell of the same thing, a world that once was, and a disaster that brought it to an end. Modern science, too, hints at such a past. At the end of the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago, glaciers melted in a sudden and dramatic warming. Sea levels rose by more than 100 meters, drowning coastlines and reshaping continents. Vast areas where people once lived were swallowed by the ocean, leaving only silence beneath the waves. At the same time, evidence points to a climatic event known as the Younger Dryas, a sudden return to near glacial cold, possibly triggered by a comet impact or massive solar outburst. Such chaos would have devastated early societies, leaving survivors scattered, their knowledge preserved only in fragments. If this catastrophe occurred, then monuments like the Sphinx, Göbekli Tepe, or Yonaguni, may be remnants of cultures that thrived before disaster struck. Imagine a people with knowledge of the stars, of stone, of mathematics, living along rich coastlines, now lost beneath the sea. When the waters rose, their cities vanished, their libraries drowned, their voices silenced. All that endured were the stones, monuments too massive for the ocean or the desert to erase. Mainstream archaeology places the rise of civilization around 5,000 years ago with the first city-states of Mesopotamia. Yet geology and myth together whisper of an older age, one that ended not because of gradual progress, but because of sudden destruction. Could the Great Pyramid, the Sphinx, and other enigmatic sites be survivors of this lost world, carried forward into a new age where their builders' names were forgotten? Picture yourself standing on the Giza Plateau, but not as it is today. Imagine it green, rivers branching like veins across fertile fields, rains falling, people gathering in cities that no longer exist. Then, suddenly, the skies darken, the earth trembles, floodwaters rise, swallowing everything. In days, centuries of knowledge are undone. Survivors cling to fragments, carrying only stories of gods, of floods, of fire, stories that echo even now. The theory of a worldwide catastrophe suggests that our history is not a straight climb from darkness to light, but a cycle of growth and destruction. If true, then the monuments we marvel at today are not beginnings, but survivors. They are reminders of what once was, and warnings of what may come again. The Great Pyramid rises from the sands like a riddle carved into eternity. We are told it was built by Khufu, a monument to his reign, a tomb for his eternal rest. But as we trace the evidence, the erosion on the Sphinx, the pillars of Göbekli Tepe, the sunken terraces of Yonaguni, and the whispers of worldwide catastrophe, another possibility begins to take shape. What if the pyramids were not the creations of Egypt's 4th dynasty at all, but relics of something far older? Imagine a civilization that flourished long before recorded history, an age of knowledge and skill erased by flood, fire, or ice. Perhaps they lived along coastlines now buried under oceans, their cities and records lost to time. When catastrophe struck, survivors scattered, leaving only fragments of their culture behind. The pyramids and other megalithic monuments may be the last echoes of this forgotten age. Survivors not of kings, but of a world we no longer remember. The silence of the Great Pyramid deepens this possibility. Unlike later Egyptian temples and tombs, it carries no inscriptions, no murals, no carvings declaring its purpose. Pharaohs loved to proclaim their names, their victories, their divine right to rule. Yet, within the Great Pyramid, Khufu's presence is a whisper, confined to a faint scrawl of red paint in a hidden chamber. If this monument were truly his creation, why is his voice absent from its walls? Could it be that he did not build it, but claimed it, inheriting a structure already ancient in his time? Some ancient texts hint at such a legacy. The Inventory, stellar though controversial, speaks of Khufu restoring the Sphinx, not creating it. Egyptian priests, when questioned by Greek travellers like Herodotus, spoke of cycles of kings and ages that stretched back thousands of years beyond their own histories. Even Plato's tale of Atlantis, told by Egyptian priests to Solon, suggests that the Egyptians held records of civilizations long forgotten by others. Could the pyramids be among those records, not written in ink, but in stone? If the pyramids are relics of a lost civilization, their purpose may not have been funerary at all. They may have been machines of knowledge, observatories of the heavens, or beacons meant to survive the tides of destruction. They may have been built not for one man's immortality, but for humanity's memory, a message carried through the ages in the only medium strong enough to endure: stone. Close your eyes and picture Khufu, walking among the ruins of something older than his reign, something already ancient. Perhaps he too wondered who had built these monuments. Perhaps he claimed them as his own, reshaping history as victors so often do. And perhaps, in doing so, he preserved them, ensuring that we would one day ask the same questions. The pyramids stand not only as monuments of Egypt, but as whispers from a forgotten world. They may be survivors of a civilization erased by time, relics left behind as proof that humanity's story stretches far deeper and far stranger than we dare to imagine. In the cool marble halls of ancient Greece, nearly 4 centuries before the birth of Christ, the philosopher Plato told a story that would echo across millennia. He spoke of an island kingdom greater than any the world had known, a place of vast wealth, advanced knowledge, and power beyond measure. This was Atlantis, a civilization that, according to Plato, vanished in a single night of fire and flood, swallowed by the sea, leaving only myth in its wake. Plato claimed he did not invent the story. He said it came from Solon, one of Greece's great lawgivers, who had heard it from Egyptian priests during his travels. These priests told of a mighty land that had once warred against Athens and the known world. Atlantis, they said, lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. And in a cataclysm of earthquakes and floods, the island sank beneath the ocean, its memory surviving only in story. For centuries, scholars have debated whether Atlantis was allegory or history, a moral tale about hubris or a memory of a real event. Yet the striking detail is not that Plato's story exists, but that it fits into a larger pattern, one found across the globe. Myths of floods and vanished lands appear in every culture, on every continent. The Sumerians told of a great deluge, when the gods warned a man named Ziusudra to build a boat and save life from the rising waters. In the Hebrew Bible, Noah receives a similar command, his ark carrying humanity through 40 days of rain. In India, the god Vishnu, in the form of a fish, warns Manu of an oncoming flood that would wash away the world. In the Americas, native peoples told of waters that rose to cover the mountains, forcing their ancestors to climb to the highest peaks or find refuge in caves. These are not isolated tales. They are echoes, scattered across time and geography, yet repeating the same theme: a world destroyed by water, a civilization erased, and survivors carrying fragments of memory into the next age. Some myths even speak of knowledge preserved, seeds, animals, wisdom itself, safeguarded so that humanity could begin again. Modern science tells us that at the end of the last ice age, sea levels rose dramatically, drowning vast coastlines. Imagine the people who lived there, their homes and fields swallowed, their cities lost forever. To them, it must have felt as though the world itself had ended. Their stories, passed down through generations, may have become the flood legends we know today. Plato's Atlantis may or may not have been real, but the persistence of global flood myths suggests that something profound happened in humanity's distant past. Perhaps it was not one flood, but many. Perhaps not one Atlantis, but countless coastal cultures, erased when the seas rose. Close your eyes and listen to the waves. beneath them may lie the ruins of forgotten worlds. The myths remind us that history is fragile, and that whole civilizations can vanish in a single night, leaving behind only whispers, waiting for us to hear. The monuments of Egypt speak most loudly through silence. The pyramids, the Sphinx, the temples, all stand as if carved from eternity itself. Yet, in the rare instances where words accompany stone, a curious pattern emerges. Rather than boasting of building, many inscriptions speak instead of restoration. As though the pharaohs did not always create these wonders, but inherited them from a time already ancient in their day. One of the most intriguing pieces of evidence comes from what is known as the Inventory Stele, discovered near the Great Pyramid at Giza. This inscription, dating to the reign of Pharaoh Khufu or later, does not present him as the builder of the Sphinx, as the official story insists. Instead, it describes Khufu as finding the monument already standing and undertaking its restoration. It speaks of the temple of Isis, mistress of the pyramid, suggesting that these structures were revered as sacred relics long before Khufu claimed them as his own. Imagine Khufu not as a master architect ordering stones hauled into place, but as a ruler who stumbled upon something already ancient, already weathered by time. Perhaps the Sphinx was buried in sand, its body hidden, its head peeking out like a sentinel from another age. To restore such a monument would have been an act not of creation, but of reverence, the reclaiming of a legacy too mysterious to be fully understood. Egyptian texts often refer to a time they called Zep-Tepi, the first time, an era when gods walked among men, when order was established out of chaos, and great works were completed before the dawn of dynastic rule. Priests told of this age to Greek travellers, describing it as a golden epoch, long forgotten, when knowledge and power were greater than in their own time. Could the pyramids and the Sphinx be relics of this legendary age, preserved and restored by later kings who sought to connect themselves to the divine? Even the dream stela of Pharaoh Thutmose IV, placed between the paws of the Sphinx 1,000 years after Khufu, tells of a rediscovery rather than construction. It describes how the young prince found the Sphinx buried in sand, how in a dream the great stone guardian spoke to him, promising kingship if he would clear the sand and restore its glory. Again, the story is not of building anew, but of unveiling what was already there, monuments whose origins had already slipped into myth. This theme runs through Egypt's legacy. Time and again, pharaohs inscribed their names on older temples, claiming them, expanding them, but rarely beginning from nothing. Egypt was a land built upon memory, upon continuity. Yet some monuments, like the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx, seem so far beyond the skill of later ages that they may not simply be continuities, but inheritances, echoes of a deeper past. Close your eyes and imagine Khufu standing before the Sphinx, not as its maker, but as a man dwarfed by its age. The sands of the desert whip around him. The stone lion gazes into eternity, and he realizes this is not his creation. It is a relic, a gift, a puzzle left behind by ancestors long forgotten. His role is not to build, but to preserve. And so, the texts that remain do not boast of invention. They whisper of restoration. A choice of words that may conceal a deeper truth, that the greatest monuments of Egypt were not born in Khufu's age at all, but carried into it from a world we no longer remember. At the feet of the Sphinx, nestled between its mighty paws, stands a granite slab worn by centuries of wind and sand. This is the dream stele erected by Pharaoh Thutmose IV around 1400 BCE. Though the stone itself is weathered and fractured, the words it carries echo with a meaning as mysterious as the monument it guards. For in these lines, the Sphinx speaks, not as a monument freshly built, but as one rediscovered, a voice of the past uncovered from beneath the desert sands. The stele tells how young Thutmose, before he became king, came to rest in the shadow of the Sphinx. In his sleep, he dreamed that the great stone guardian spoke to him. The Sphinx promised him the throne of Egypt if he would clear away the sands that had buried its body. Inspired, Thutmose ordered the monument uncovered and restored, and when he ascended to the throne, he placed this stele as testimony to the dream that changed his fate. What the dream stele does not say is equally telling. It does not claim that Thutmose built the Sphinx. It does not even attribute the monument to a specific pharaoh. Instead, it speaks of uncovering, of restoration, of bringing back into the light something that was already ancient in his own time. Even 3,500 years ago, the Sphinx was old enough to be buried in sand and forgotten, its origins already lost to memory. This is not an isolated story. Across Egypt, we find evidence of monuments rediscovered, reclaimed, and repurposed. Temples were built on foundations far older than the pharaohs who expanded them. Columns inscribed with one king's name often stand upon bases inscribed with another's. Egypt was a land where rulers inherited the works of the past, layering their own legacy upon foundations whose true age was rarely acknowledged. But the Sphinx is different. Its silence is absolute. No ancient text clearly identifies its builder. No record describes its construction. Instead, we are left with fragments. The dream stele speaking of restoration, geological evidence of water erosion pointing to a wetter climate thousands of years earlier, and traditions of Zep Tepi, the first time when gods or divine kings shaped the land before history began. The Sphinx seems less a monument of Egypt's fourth dynasty and more a relic of something deeper, something older, a forgotten chapter of human history. Imagine the scene as Thutmose might have experienced it. He approaches the Sphinx half buried, its lion's body hidden beneath dunes, only its weathered head peering above the sand like a sentinel. The desert wind howls. He falls asleep in its shadow, and in his dream the stone itself speaks, a voice from an age beyond his own. It offers him power, but also reminds him of his duty, to restore, not to create. When he awakens, he does not see himself as the Sphinx's maker, but as its caretaker. The dream stele stands as proof that even in antiquity, the origins of Egypt's greatest monuments were already shrouded in mystery. They were not monuments of memory, but of forgetting. Relics uncovered again and again, each generation layering its own story atop the silence of the stones. The desert holds its secrets in silence, but fragments of memory surface in unexpected places, in scriptures, in chronicles, in myths handed down through centuries. Among these fragments are tantalizing hints that the pyramids and other monuments of Egypt may not have been the work of Khufu's age at all, but of builders far older, whose names and stories have long been forgotten. In the traditions of Egypt's later Coptic Christians, whispers survive of monuments raised before the flood. According to some Coptic texts, it was not Khufu, nor Khafra, nor any pharaoh who first raised the Great Pyramids of Giza, but a figure named Surid. Surid, described as a king or prophet, foresaw a coming deluge that would sweep across the land and erase all knowledge. To preserve wisdom, he ordered the construction of vast stone structures, filled with writings, treasures, and instruments of science, sealed against the rising waters. These stories, written down in medieval times, but rooted in far older oral traditions, suggest that the pyramids were seen not as tombs, but as time capsules, relics from an age before disaster struck. The echoes of this idea are not confined to Egypt. In Mesopotamia, land of the Sumerians and Babylonians, ancient tablets tell of gods who granted kingship before the flood, rulers who reigned for thousands of years, their monuments long since lost. The Sumerian king list divides history into two parts: before the flood and after. The kings of the antediluvian era are described as almost mythical in their longevity, yet their reigns are recorded as fact, not fantasy. When the flood came, it swept them all away, leaving behind only fragments of their story carved in clay. Even in Babylonian myth, we find figures like Oumuamua, a being who rose from the sea to teach humanity the arts of civilization, writing, agriculture, architecture. These stories describe not the gradual invention of knowledge, but the sudden gift of it, as though wisdom were passed down from an earlier, forgotten source. Could these Mesopotamian accounts be parallel to Egypt's Zep Tepi, that mysterious first time when gods or divine kings shaped the land before human memory began? Imagine the Coptic scribes copying their texts, recalling ancient tales of pyramids built to survive the flood. Picture the Mesopotamian priests inscribing tablets, preserving the names of kings who ruled long before history officially began. These are not mere fables. They are fragments of memory, perhaps distorted by centuries of retelling, but rooted in something that once was real. The convergence is striking. Egypt speaks of a first time, Mesopotamia of kings before the flood, Coptic texts of pyramids built to preserve knowledge against disaster. Each tradition points to the same haunting idea, that great monuments existed before recorded history, raised by builders whose names are lost to us, whose works were inherited rather than created anew. Close your eyes and let the voices of these ancient texts drift across the ages. They whisper of kings who ruled before pharaohs, of floods that erased civilizations, of pyramids not as tombs, but as libraries of stone. Whether myth or memory, they leave us with a chilling question. Are the monuments we see today truly the creations of dynastic Egypt, or the survivors of a world that came before? Across the world, myths endure like echoes in the dark. They are stories told by firelight, carved into temple walls, whispered by priests and poets, passed from one generation to the next. To the modern ear, they often sound like fantasy, tales of gods and monsters, floods and fires, heroes and golden ages. But what if these myths are not simply inventions of imagination? What if they are coded memories, fragments of real events preserved in story because no other record could survive? Consider again the Egyptian concept of Zep Tepi, the first time. Priests described it as an age when gods walked among men, when knowledge was given, when monuments were raised before dynastic Egypt ever began. To us, it may sound like legend, but could it be a memory of a forgotten civilization, recast in divine terms because the names of its builders were already lost? The Sumerians spoke of kings who ruled for thousands of years before the flood. Their names are inscribed on the Sumerian king list, preserved on clay tablets. To dismiss them as myth ignores the persistence of their record, repeated again and again by scribes who believed they were recording history. Perhaps these long reigns were exaggerations, or perhaps they were memories distorted by time, a way of marking that those who came before lived in an age different from our own. Flood stories, too, echo across continents. From Noah in the Bible to Manu in India, from Utnapishtim in Mesopotamia to Native American legends of waters rising to cover mountains, the pattern repeats. They all tell of a world destroyed, of a few survivors carrying seeds of life and knowledge into the next age. Science shows us that seas did indeed rise dramatically at the end of the Ice Age, swallowing coastlines where countless people must have lived. Could these myths be their voices, preserved in the only way they could endure, as stories? Even myths of gods descending from the sky or rising from the sea may hide memories of teachers or survivors, those who carried fragments of knowledge from a lost world. To a people who had nothing but stone tools and oral tradition, such figures would appear divine. Over centuries, their human traits would blur into the supernatural, but the memory of their gifts, of architecture, astronomy, agriculture, would remain. Close your eyes and imagine the moment when disaster struck. Cities crumble, coastlines vanish, fires burn, floods rise. Survivors cling to life, carrying with them only fragments of memory. They cannot preserve their libraries, their monuments, their names, but they can tell stories. They tell them to their children, who tell them to theirs. Over generations, the details change, but the core remains. There was a world before, and it ended. Perhaps myths are not fantasies at all, but messages from deep time. They are the voices of the forgotten, encoded in story, so that when stone crumbles and paper burns, memory can still endure. And if we listen carefully, those myths may guide us back to truths buried beneath sand and sea, reminding us that history is not just what we have written, but also what we have chosen to remember in story. Walk along the ruins of ancient Egypt and let your eyes rest on the stone. Not the grandeur of the pyramids themselves, not the scale of the temples, but the stones that make them. Blocks of granite, basalt, and diorite, cut and shaped with a mastery that defies the tools we are told the builders possessed. At Giza, Saqqara, and Abydos, you will find blocks of granite weighing dozens of tons, their surfaces polished smooth, their edges sharp as though cut yesterday. Some form doorways and lintels so precisely squared that even modern engineers pause in wonder. Others form massive sarcophagi, hollowed out from single blocks of stone so hard that even today diamond-tipped drills would struggle to achieve the same smoothness. The interiors are not rough or crude, but mirror-like, the walls straight, the corners exact. Copper chisels, the tools attributed to these ancient builders, bend easily against limestone, let alone granite. Yet the quarries at Aswan bear scars of cuts so deep, so straight, they resemble the marks of giant saws or drills. Grooves run across stone faces with a regularity that suggests not pounding and chiseling, but slicing, as though a machine once cut through the rock with steady rhythm. Even the unfinished obelisk, still lying half-carved in its quarry, shows traces of work that seem almost mechanical. Smooth channels carved around its sides, as if it were separated from the bedrock with tools lost to time. Archaeologists often explain this away as persistence, as countless hours of labour with primitive tools. Yet the evidence resists. The surfaces are too fine, the angles too exact. At sites like the Serapeum of Saqqara, massive stone boxes carved from solid granite rest in narrow tunnels, each weighing up to 70 tons. Their lids fit so tightly against the bases that not even a razor blade can slide between them. To imagine peasants with copper chisels carving such perfection underground, with no light but oil lamps, strains belief. Then there are the drill holes, cylindrical cuts in granite blocks, their grooves spiraling with a precision that suggests advanced boring tools. Some researchers argue they reveal not only drilling, but rapid drilling, at a rate that primitive hand tools could never achieve. What kind of technology could produce such marks thousands of years before iron, before steel, before machines? Imagine standing in those dark tunnels, your hand brushing the smooth interior of a granite box, your reflection faintly visible in stone polished 4,000 years ago. It feels less like archaeology and more like stepping into a workshop where the tools have vanished but the products remain, mocking our explanations. Perhaps the ancients possessed techniques now lost, knowledge of abrasives, of leverage, of methods that we have overlooked. Or perhaps their tools were something more, something that does not fit into our neat timeline of progress. Close your eyes and consider the possibility. The monuments are not crude or accidental. They are precise, deliberate, engineered with a skill that seems out of place in their time. They whisper of a technology not remembered, a science erased, a mastery that does not belong to the world we think we know. Step inside the Great Pyramid, and the air changes. The chaos of the desert falls away, replaced by silence so deep it feels alive. The stone seems to breathe, its vast weight pressing in from all sides. As you walk through narrow corridors and ascend the sloping passageways, you enter spaces that do not feel accidental. They feel tuned, like the inside of an instrument, designed not only to enclose, but to resonate. In the king's chamber, this effect is unmistakable. The walls are hewn from massive blocks of granite, each weighing more than 70 tons. Strike one gently, and a deep hum reverberates, the sound lingering in the air long after the touch has passed. Some researchers have measured this resonance and found that the chamber vibrates at specific frequencies, as though it were built not merely as a room, but as a resonant cavity designed with acoustic precision. The Grand Gallery, too, suggests design for sound. Its corbelled walls rise in stepped layers, narrowing as they ascend, amplifying footsteps and voices in ways that are uncanny. A whisper becomes a murmur becomes a chant, and a chant grows until it seems to fill the entire passageway. Was this an accident of architecture, or was it intentional? The harnessing of resonance, a technology of vibration that we have only begun to rediscover. Modern science tells us that sound and vibration can shape matter. Resonance can shatter glass, shift sand into geometric patterns, even alter the properties of fluids. In the natural world, resonance is everywhere. In the hum of bees, the rhythm of waves, the pulse of the earth itself. Could the builders of the pyramids have known these principles, embedding them into stone not for decoration, but for function? Some hypotheses go further still. The placement of the chambers, the materials of granite and limestone, the shafts aligned to the stars, all may have worked together as part of an energetic system. The pyramid may have been less a tomb than a machine, capturing and amplifying natural forces. Researchers have speculated about piezoelectric effects in the quartz crystals of granite. About the pyramid, as a giant resonator for Earth's own vibrations, about the possibility that it once generated or transmitted energy in ways we do not yet understand. Skeptics argue these are fantasies, the product of imagination, yet the stones remain. They hum, they resonate, and the experience of standing within them is undeniable. The sense that you are inside a structure designed not only for space, but for sound. Close your eyes and imagine the ancient builders chanting in the grand gallery, their voices weaving together, the stone walls amplifying the sound until the pyramid itself seems to sing. Perhaps they were not worshipping, but working, not praying, but activating. Perhaps the pyramid was built not to house the dead, but to awaken something within the living. The resonance lingers even now, a low hum across time, asking us to listen. In 1993, a small robot rolled into the darkness of the Great Pyramid and uncovered one of its most enduring mysteries. Its name was Oumuamua 2, the opener of the ways, designed by German engineer Rudolf Gantenbrink. Fitted with lights and a camera, the robot crept up a narrow shaft, barely wide, enough for its body, leading from the Queen's chamber. No human had ever seen this passage in full. It had lain in darkness for more than 4,000 years. The shaft extended upward, smooth and precise, angled toward the heavens. For meters, the robot climbed, its wheels grinding against the limestone, until it reached something unexpected. A small limestone slab blocking the passage. Embedded in this slab were 2 copper fittings, like handles, gleaming in the robot's light. A door, a barrier, a secret. Why would a simple air shaft, as Egyptologists call it, end in a sealed door? Why carve a tunnel through stone only to close it off? Gantenbrink himself was stunned. The discovery suggested intention, as though the shaft were more than ventilation, more than symbolic alignment. It hinted at chambers still hidden within the pyramid, knowledge sealed away, waiting. Years later, in 2002, another robot was sent into the shaft. This time it drilled a small hole in the limestone door and peered beyond with a fiber optic camera. What it revealed only deepened the mystery. Another space, and beyond it, another block of stone. A second door, hidden within the first. The pyramid had not surrendered its secret. Instead, it had offered a riddle, a door behind a door, as though guarding something too important to be revealed. Elsewhere in the pyramid, shafts from both the King's chamber and the Queen's chamber point toward specific stars: Orion, Sirius, and the circumpolar constellations. These alignments seem deliberate, precise. If the shafts were symbolic, gateways for the soul of the pharaoh, why end some of them with sealed doors? Why carve copper fittings into stone slabs that no human eyes were meant to see? The design suggests purpose, but not one easily explained by funerary tradition. Gantenbrink's discovery reignited debates that still echo today. Some believe the shafts conceal hidden chambers, perhaps filled with relics or texts from an age before Khufu. Others suggest they are part of a larger mechanism, the pyramid functioning not as a tomb, but as a machine, with sealed passages as keys to its operation. And still others whisper that the builders left the doors as symbols, a deliberate challenge to future generations. Seek, but you may not find. Close your eyes and imagine the robot's light cutting into darkness untouched for millennia. The shaft stretches forward, the air heavy and stale, until at last the beam falls upon copper and stone. A door waiting, not for the pharaoh, not for the dead, but for us, for the living who would one day look back and wonder. The hidden doors remain closed. The pyramid keeps its silence. But their presence is enough to remind us that this monument still holds secrets, still guards mysteries, and still refuses to give up all of its truth. Step inside the Great Pyramid and ask yourself a simple question. Where is the body? For centuries, Egyptologists have insisted that the pyramid was built as a tomb for Pharaoh Khufu. Yet no mummy has ever been found inside. No sarcophagus filled with treasures. No inscriptions of funerary rituals or hymns to the gods. What we see instead are chambers, vast, resonant, geometric spaces, connected by shafts and passageways that feel less like the resting place of a king, and more like the inner workings of something mechanical. The king's chamber is not adorned with hieroglyphs. It is stark, austere, built from massive granite blocks, transported from Aswan, hundreds of kilometers away. Above it lie a series of relieving chambers, stacked layers of granite beams, each weighing dozens of tons. Egyptologists say they were built to distribute the weight of the pyramid, to keep the chamber from collapsing. Yet their design is strangely elaborate, almost over-engineered, as though they served not only a structural purpose, but also an energetic one. A system of resonance, tuned like the components of a great instrument. The Queen's chamber, too, holds enigmas. Its shafts, angled upward, lead not to the outside, but to sealed doors, copper fittings gleaming in the dark. Why build such passages, invisible and inaccessible? Were they symbolic tunnels for a spirit's journey, or conduits for something else, something unseen? Some researchers have proposed a startling hypothesis, that the pyramid was never intended as a tomb at all, but as a machine. Perhaps it was designed to harness natural forces, the vibrations of the earth, the flow of underground water, the resonance of granite. The pyramid's very materials seem chosen with care. Granite is rich in quartz, a mineral known for its piezoelectric properties, capable of generating electricity under pressure. Limestone, which encases much of the structure, is an excellent insulator. Together, they suggest a system not of death, but of energy. Imagine the pyramid as a resonator, its chambers humming with sound, its shafts channeling vibrations, its massive stones amplifying forces. We have only begun to rediscover. Some envision it as a power plant, others as a transmitter, still others as a device for spiritual awakening, a machine built not to serve one man's immortality, but to elevate humanity itself. Skeptics dismiss these ideas, pointing out the lack of physical machinery, the absence of obvious mechanisms. But the pyramid does not yield its secrets so easily. It stands as a puzzle, a design that resists simple explanation. Tomb or machine, monument or message, it is clear only that it was built with precision and purpose beyond the ordinary. Close your eyes and picture the pyramid not as a silent tomb, but as something alive, humming with energy, its stones vibrating in harmony with the earth. Imagine it glowing under the sun, not as a monument to death, but as a beacon of knowledge, a machine meant to endure the ages. Whether or not it functioned as such, the very possibility lingers in its silence, challenging us to see it not as a relic, but as a device whose purpose we have yet to understand. The Great Pyramid is often described as the pinnacle of Egypt's Old Kingdom, a triumph of human ambition and labour. Yet, when we look closer, when we trace its alignments, its dimensions, and its engineering, the monument seems to whisper something unsettling, that the knowledge behind it did not belong to its age. It feels out of place, as though someone reached across time to place in the hands of the ancients truths they should not have known. The Egyptians of Khufu's era were brilliant, yes, but their tools were simple: copper chisels, ropes, wooden sledges. Their records, carved in hieroglyphs, celebrate agriculture, trade, and ritual. Nowhere do they describe mathematics that captures the circumference of the Earth, or astronomy that aligns monuments with Orion's belt and the circumpolar stars. Yet these are the very secrets written into the pyramid stones. How could a Bronze Age people encode constants like pi and the golden ratio with such precision? How could they mirror the planet's dimensions in a monument of stone, without satellites, without telescopes, without clocks that measure the heavens over millennia? Some scholars argue that it was chance, the outcome of trial and error, or the byproduct of practical design. But the pyramid's accuracy resists this explanation. Its base is level to within centimetres across more than 200 metres. Its sides face true north with an error so slight that even modern engineers pause in admiration. Its stones are fitted so closely that 4,000 years of earthquakes and shifting sands have failed to shake it apart. This is not accident. This is mastery, and mastery implies knowledge. Knowledge far ahead of its time. Perhaps the builders inherited it, fragments of wisdom from an older age. Perhaps they preserved techniques passed down through oral tradition, their origin already forgotten. Or perhaps, as some suggest, they were taught by others, teachers who appeared briefly in humanity's early dawn, offering insights into the stars, the earth, and the geometry of the cosmos. Legends across the world echo this theme. In Mesopotamia, Oans rose from the sea to teach civilization. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl arrived with knowledge of astronomy and architecture. In Egypt, gods like Thoth and Osiris were credited with gifts of wisdom and order. Perhaps these gods were not divine in the sense we imagine, but memories of people or beings who carried knowledge from a vanished world. Close your eyes and imagine an ancient builder standing on the Giza plateau, gazing at the night sky. Perhaps he does not discover the secrets of precession and planetary dimensions himself. Perhaps he repeats knowledge passed to him, echoing a truth older than his time. He lays stone upon stone, not just with strength, but with wisdom inherited from beyond. The Great Pyramid endures as a paradox, a Bronze Age monument carrying the fingerprints of knowledge that seems centuries, even millennia, too advanced. It stands not as proof of what we know, but as a question carved in stone. How much have we forgotten, and who or what first taught us the language of the stars? Step inside the Great Pyramid, and you will notice something strange. Something so obvious it is often overlooked. The walls are bare. No hieroglyphs cover the passages. No prayers to the gods adorn the chambers. No cartouches proclaim the name of a king. For a civilization that filled its tombs and temples with words, images, and spells for the afterlife, the Great Pyramid's silence is almost deafening. In the Valley of the Kings, tombs of pharaohs are covered floor to ceiling with inscriptions. Hymns to Ra, spells from the Book of the Dead, images of gods guiding the soul through the underworld. These tombs were designed to ensure the eternal journey of the pharaoh, to remind the gods who lay within and to proclaim his divine right for all time. Yet, in the Great Pyramid, supposedly the grandest tomb of them all, there is nothing. No hymns, no gods, no story, only stone. Even Khufu himself, is a ghost within its walls. His name does not appear carved in glory across the chambers, as one might expect from a king who commanded the largest monument on earth. Instead, his presence rests on a single, disputed inscription, a scroll of red paint in a hidden chamber above the king's chamber, discovered in the 19th century. To some, it is proof of his authorship. To others, it is too little, too fragile, a mark that could have been added centuries later. It feels less like a signature of pride, and more like a faint whisper, as though Khufu borrowed the monument rather than built it. Why would the Egyptians, masters of inscription, leave their greatest work mute? Egyptologists often suggest that the pyramid's outer casing once held inscriptions, or that its function was purely symbolic. But this explanation falters. The smooth white limestone casing stones, polished to a mirror sheen, would have reflected sunlight like a star. To carve them with hieroglyphs would have diminished their brilliance. And inside, where kings proclaimed their power in every other tomb, the emptiness cannot be explained away so easily. Perhaps the pyramid's silence is intentional. Perhaps it was never meant as a tomb at all. Or perhaps it was already ancient when Khufu found it, its inscriptions eroded by time, its builders long forgotten. In claiming it, he left only his faint mark, while the deeper truth remained sealed in stone. Close your eyes and stand in the king's chamber. The walls rise around you, unadorned, vast blocks of granite fitted with impossible precision. No names call out, no gods watch from the walls, only silence. It is a silence that feels deliberate, a silence that feels like a message, as if the builders wanted the monument itself, its geometry, its resonance, its impossible perfection, to be the message. The absence of hieroglyphs does not leave us with less. It leaves us with more questions, more mystery, more reason to wonder who built the Great Pyramid, and why they chose to let the stones speak without words. Not far from the Great Pyramid, an ancient inscription carved into stone has stirred controversy for more than a century. It is called the Inventory Stele, a relic that does not fit neatly into the accepted timeline of Egypt's history. To mainstream Egyptology, it is an outlier, a curiosity, but to those who listen closely, it whispers of a story far older and far stranger than the one told in textbooks. The Inventory Stele was discovered in the 19th century near the ruins of a temple at Giza. Its inscription, though incomplete and weathered, records the deeds of Pharaoh Khufu. But here, Khufu is not celebrated as the builder of the Great Pyramid or the Sphinx. Instead, he is described as restoring them, monuments that the stele claims already existed in his time. Even the Temple of Isis, mistress of the pyramid, is mentioned as standing at Giza long before Khufu walked the earth. This is not what we are taught. The official narrative tells us that Khufu commissioned the Great Pyramid as his tomb around 2600 BCE, that the Sphinx was carved by his son Khafra, and that the plateau was largely empty before their reigns. But the Inventory Stele tells a different tale. It suggests that Khufu came upon monuments already ancient, already sacred, and that his role was not to create, but to preserve, to repair, and to honour. Mainstream scholars often dismiss the stele as a much later inscription, written centuries after Khufu, blending myth and history into a confused legend. They argue that it cannot be taken as fact, that it reflects religious storytelling rather than historical truth. Yet even if it is not contemporary, it reveals something important, that Egyptians themselves, in later ages, believed the pyramids and the Sphinx were older than the pharaohs, to whom we now attribute them. Imagine Khufu standing on the Giza plateau, not as a builder surveying a construction site, but as a king confronted by monuments so vast and mysterious that even he felt compelled to claim them. Perhaps he could not explain their origins, but he could link his name to them, binding his legacy to their silence. To restore is to inherit, and to inherit is to admit that someone else came before. The inventory. Stele may not provide definitive proof, but it forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. Why would later Egyptians invent a story of Khufu as restorer rather than glorify him as the builder? Why does the stele mention temples and monuments that should not yet have existed, unless memory of their deeper antiquity persisted into later ages? Close your eyes and picture the stele itself, its surface cracked, its lines faint but enduring. It is not as grand as the pyramid it describes, but its voice carries weight. It tells us that even in antiquity, the origins of Giza were uncertain, wrapped in legend and mystery. Perhaps the Egyptians themselves knew they were caretakers of something older, relics from a forgotten world, inherited and restored, but never truly explained. The sands of Egypt conceal as much as they reveal. For every monument unearthed, there are whispers of others hidden away. Sealed passages, unopened chambers, discoveries quickly locked behind gates and silence. To walk among the ruins is to feel the weight not only of stone, but of secrecy. Why are so many mysteries left unanswered? Why are so many questions met not with curiosity, but with denial? Consider the shafts of the Great Pyramid, where robots like Upot crept forward into darkness, uncovering doors with copper fittings, sealed for millennia. When the first images emerged, the world waited for answers. Yet, after drilling a small hole to peer inside, the exploration stopped. What lay beyond the second block of stone has never been revealed. Official reports remain vague, photographs scarce. It is as though the pyramid itself demanded silence, or those who study it chose silence in its place. At Saqqara, the Serapeum holds massive granite boxes, some weighing 70 tons, hidden deep underground. No inscriptions tell us their purpose. No mummies have been found within. Their polished interiors and perfect angles suggest a purpose more complex than burial. Yet access is limited, and their mystery left unresolved. Scholars shrug, calling them tombs, though they hold no dead. Again and again, stories surface of tunnels beneath the Giza plateau, of chambers detected by ground-penetrating radar, of anomalies hidden beneath the Sphinx. In 1997, seismic surveys suggested a cavity beneath the pores of the Sphinx. Excitement surged. Could this be a hidden chamber, perhaps holding texts from the so-called Hall of Records, a legendary library of lost knowledge? But soon the results were dismissed, the surveys quieted, and the story faded into obscurity. Official explanations insist there is nothing there. Yet the instruments told a different tale. Why this reluctance? Perhaps it is caution, the need for evidence before grand claims. But perhaps it is something more. If the pyramids and the Sphinx are older than we believe, if they carry knowledge that predates recorded history, then much of what we teach about civilization would have to be rewritten. To admit such truths would unravel the neat timeline of progress, forcing us to accept that human history is far deeper, far stranger than our books allow. Imagine standing at the entrance of a tunnel barred by iron gates. The air that drifts out is cool, untouched, ancient. You know something lies within, something unseen, perhaps something extraordinary. But the door is locked, the way forbidden, the knowledge postponed. That is the feeling that lingers around so many of Egypt's secrets. Not absence, but concealment. The unexplained silence of the pyramids may not be an accident. It may be deliberate, preserved not only by the builders, but by those who guard them now. Whether from fear of controversy, the burden of responsibility, or the weight of hidden knowledge, the result is the same. The stones remain silent, and those who hold the keys keep them so. The Great Pyramid is silent, but its silence does not always feel accidental. At times, it feels as though the silence was crafted, chosen, even protected. The absence of hieroglyphs, the sealed shafts, the unopened chambers, the reluctance to explore further. Together, they form a pattern, one that whispers of deliberate concealment. The ancient Egyptians were masters of record-keeping. They inscribed stories on temple walls, recorded daily transactions on papyrus, and etched prayers into the tombs of their kings. Yet, when it comes to the most colossal structure they ever produced, there is nothing, not a single word to explain its purpose, not a single inscription declaring its function. The silence itself feels intentional, as though the builders wanted the pyramid to conceal its secret rather than reveal it. Some believe this concealment began not in modern times, but at the very moment of construction. The pyramid may have been designed not to be understood, but to guard something: knowledge, energy, or perhaps even relics. The hidden doors found by Gantenbrink's robot, the unexplored cavities beneath the Sphinx, the sealed passages that lead nowhere we can see, all suggest that the builders were not careless. They were deliberate. They sealed knowledge away as though protecting it for another time, or from those unworthy to receive it. Legends across cultures speak of wisdom hidden against catastrophe. In the Coptic tales of Egypt, King Surid is said to have built the pyramids to safeguard knowledge before a great flood. In Mesopotamian myths, sages preserved tablets of wisdom before the waters came. Could the Great Pyramid itself be a vault, its silence a form of protection, a lock waiting for the right key? In our own age, concealment continues. Discoveries are made, but access is limited. Chambers are detected by instruments, but left unexplored. Findings are announced with excitement, then quietly forgotten. Official explanations reduce mysteries to simple functions: air shafts, tombs, ritual structures. Yet the evidence resists these reductions. Perhaps modern concealment is less about protecting sacred knowledge, and more about protecting the story we tell ourselves. A story of gradual progress, of neat timelines, of civilizations rising in orderly succession. To admit something older, something unexplainable, would unravel that story. Close your eyes and imagine the pyramid as a safe. Its passages are locks, its chambers are codes, its silence is the steel that keeps its contents hidden. Perhaps what it conceals is not treasure in the ordinary sense, but truth itself. Truth too great, too disruptive to reveal openly. The idea of deliberate concealment changes how we see the pyramid. It is not a tomb robbed of its treasures. It is not a monument worn down by time. It is a guardian, keeping its secrets intact, refusing to yield them until the right moment, or the right people, arrive to ask the right questions. And so, the silence of the Great Pyramid may not be emptiness at all. It may be the sound of something being hidden, waiting for us to remember how to listen. Stand once more in the heart of the Great Pyramid. Around you, rise blocks of granite so immense that their weight presses down like the hand of time itself. No inscriptions guide your eyes, no gods watch from the walls, no pharaoh proclaims his glory. Only silence, deep and unbroken. And as you linger in that silence, you begin to wonder, could the silence itself be the message? In every other Egyptian tomb, words fill the space. Hieroglyphs guide the soul to the afterlife. Spells protect the king from chaos. Paintings ensure that food, drink, and servants will follow him into eternity. But here, where the grandest of all tombs should shout the loudest, there is nothing. This emptiness is not oversight. It is intention. Perhaps the builders meant for us to listen, not with our eyes, but with our minds. The pyramid's message may not lie in carved names, but in geometry, in alignment, in the precision of its form. Silence forces us to notice what words might distract us from, the exactness of its orientation to true north, the hidden mathematics of pi and phi, the resonance of its chambers. In silence, the pyramid speaks a language beyond culture, a universal message carved not in script but in stone. Yet silence can also be warning. Imagine a civilization older than Egypt, one that rose, flourished, and fell. Perhaps they left the pyramid behind, not as a boast, but as a monument to what was lost, a reminder that even the greatest societies can vanish. To fill it with inscriptions would have tied it to their age, their language, their people. But silence makes it timeless, a riddle any future generation could inherit. The pyramid does not tell us who built it. It tells us that something was built, and that it endured. There is another possibility, darker still. The silence may conceal a truth too dangerous to reveal. Perhaps the pyramid holds knowledge of forces we do not yet understand, technologies that could be misused if openly described. In leaving no instructions, the builders ensured that only those who could decode the structure itself, who could see beyond appearances, might one day rediscover its secrets. Silence, in this sense, is both barrier and protection. Close your eyes and imagine the pyramid as a great teacher, standing in the desert for thousands of years. It does not lecture, it does not shout, it waits. Its silence forces us to ask questions, to look deeper, to confront our assumptions, and in doing so, it shapes us. The message may be simple. Seek truth, not in words, but in what endures. Or perhaps it is a warning. Remember what was lost, lest it be lost again. As the wind moves over the plateau, the pyramid remains still, its silence unbroken. Yet within that silence lies meaning, a message carved not in hieroglyphs, but in absence, a message that may be invitation, or reminder, or warning, one that says, listen. On the Giza Plateau, 3 great pyramids rise from the sand like frozen constellations. From above, their arrangement is unmistakable, 3 in a row, 2 large and 1 smaller, offset slightly to the side. To the untrained eye, it is coincidence, but to those who know the night sky, it mirrors something familiar, the 3 stars of Orion's belt. For centuries, people have wondered whether this resemblance was deliberate. The stars of Orion are sacred in many traditions, but in Egypt they held special meaning. The god Osiris, lord of the afterlife, was associated with Orion. The soul of the pharaoh, it was believed, would rise to join him among the stars. Could the builders of the pyramids have arranged their monuments to reflect the heavens, ensuring that their king's spirit would travel a cosmic pathway written in stone? The alignments do not end there. Shafts inside the Great Pyramid point toward specific stars. Orion's belt in the south, the circumpolar stars in the north, the so-called imperishable ones, which never set and thus symbolized eternity. One shaft points towards Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, linked to the goddess Isis, Osiris's divine consort. These are not vague alignments. They are precise, calculated, fixed to the skies as they appeared thousands of years ago. To understand such alignments requires more than superstition. It requires observation of the heavens across centuries, perhaps millennia, to track the slow drift of the stars caused by precession, the 26,000-year wobble of Earth's axis. Did the builders possess such knowledge? If so, then their understanding of the cosmos was far beyond what we attribute to a Bronze Age society. Some researchers suggest the pyramids may not simply reflect the stars, but communicate with them. The shafts could have served as symbolic doorways for the pharaoh's soul, or as conduits of energy, aligned with celestial forces. The pyramid itself, with its perfect geometry and orientation, may have been a kind of map, a message written in the universal language of the stars. When we look across the ancient world, we see the same pattern. At Teotihuacan in Mexico, the pyramids align with celestial cycles. At Stonehenge in England, the stones mark solstices. In Cambodia, Angkor Wat reflects the motion of Venus. Over and over, cultures across time and distance sought to anchor heaven to earth, as if reminding us that human destiny is written in the stars. Close your eyes and imagine the builders of Giza, standing beneath a desert sky, untouched by city lights. The Milky Way blazes overhead, Orion rising above the horizon. They place their stones not just for stability, but for meaning, anchoring their monuments to the eternal rhythms of the cosmos. Perhaps they were not merely honoring gods. Perhaps they were speaking in a language older than writing, the language of the stars. The pyramids whisper in silence, but when we trace their alignments, we begin to hear that language. It is a language not bound to Egypt, nor to humanity, but to the universe itself. The Great Pyramid has long been a monument to mystery, and where mystery thrives, speculation follows. Among the most provocative ideas is the ancient astronaut theory, the belief that beings from beyond our world visited Earth in the distant past and left their mark upon human civilization. To its supporters, the pyramid is not only a tomb or a monument, but evidence of contact with advanced intelligence. To its critics, it is fantasy, born from underestimating the ingenuity of ancient people. Yet the idea persists, whispered like desert wind through the corridors of history. Proponents of the theory point first to the impossible scale and precision of the pyramids. How, they ask, could a Bronze Age society align a monument of millions of stones with true north to a fraction of a degree? How could they quarry and transport granite beams weighing 70 tons, fitting them with such accuracy that even today, with lasers and diamond drills, we marvel at the result? To some, the answer lies not in forgotten tools or lost techniques, but in guidance from elsewhere. Visitors who offered knowledge, who shared secrets of engineering, astronomy, and mathematics far ahead of their time. The theory stretches beyond Giza. Legends from around the world tell of gods who descended from the sky to teach humanity. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, beings who came from the heavens to shape human destiny. The Dogon of Mali preserved traditions of star systems invisible to the naked eye. Across the Americas, deities like Quetzalcoatl and Viracocha were described as teachers of knowledge, arriving suddenly, then vanishing. To believers, these are not mere myths, but memories, distorted echoes of encounters with beings from the stars. Critics, however, push back. They argue that attributing the pyramids to extraterrestrials diminishes the achievements of the Egyptians. To suggest the monuments were built with alien help, they say, is to ignore the creativity, persistence, and brilliance of human ingenuity. Copper chisels may bend against granite, but with sand, abrasives, and persistence, stone can be shaped. Ramps may be unwieldy, but with thousands of workers and years of labour, blocks can be moved. The pyramids, they argue, are not impossible, only extraordinary. And yet, the questions remain. Why is there no clear record of how the pyramids were built? Why do myths across cultures echo with stories of beings descending from the sky? Why do the monuments themselves contain alignments and proportions that speak to knowledge seemingly out of place in their age? Perhaps the truth lies not in absolutes, but in possibilities. The ancient astronaut theory may never be proven, yet its allure endures because the pyramids themselves resist explanation. They sit in silence, daring us to imagine, to wonder whether humanity built them alone, or whether, just once, we were not alone. Close your eyes and picture the desert night. The pyramids rise beneath Orion's belt, stars glittering above, sand stretching endlessly below. In that vast silence, the line between gods, men, and visitors from the heavens begins to blur, and the question lingers, timeless and unresolved. Who truly built the monuments that still watch over us? The Great Pyramid is often called a tomb, but when you walk its passages, it does not feel like a place for the dead. It feels like a riddle, a machine, perhaps even a message. No treasures line its chambers, no words cover its walls. Instead, it speaks in geometry, in alignments, in ratios that whisper of the earth, the heavens, and the cosmos. Some have wondered, could the pyramid itself be a time capsule, or even a beacon left for the future? Imagine a civilization aware that disaster was coming. A flood, a fire, a catastrophe that would erase its memory from the world. How could they preserve their knowledge? Papyrus crumbles, clay tablets shatter, even metal corrodes. But stone endures. To carve wisdom into stone is to give it a chance to outlast the ages. The Great Pyramid, then, may not be a tomb at all, but a library without words, a message written in form rather than script. Its proportions encode pi, phi, and the dimensions of the Earth. Its alignments point to Orion and Sirius. These are truths not bound by culture, but by the universe itself, eternal, unchanging, waiting to be rediscovered. Others see in the pyramid something more active than a time capsule. They see a beacon, a monument designed not only to preserve knowledge, but to call out across time, perhaps even across space. The shafts leading from its chambers, angled toward the stars, look less like symbolic passages for the soul, and more like channels of communication. Some suggest the pyramid was built to resonate with the Earth's vibrations, to harness energy, to radiate power. If so, it may have been more than a monument. It may have been a signal, a lighthouse of stone. If this seems far-fetched, consider how humans themselves have sent messages into the cosmos. Golden records aboard Voyager, radio signals pulsing into the dark. We imagine that one day, someone, somewhere, might find them and know that we were here. Could the builders of the pyramids have done the same, but in stone? A monument so vast that even if civilizations fell, even if languages were forgotten, the message would remain, waiting for those who came after to notice. The silence of the pyramid may not be emptiness, it may be deliberate. Words fade, but geometry endures. Language divides, but mathematics unites. If the pyramid is a message, it is one written for all who live beneath the same stars. A time capsule of knowledge, a beacon of remembrance, a signal carved in stone that says, "We were here and we knew." Close your eyes and imagine the pyramid not as a relic of the past, but as a voice calling across eternity. Its stones shine once more in polished white, gleaming beneath the sun by day, glowing beneath the stars by night. It waits, patient and enduring, for the moment its message is finally heard. The Great Pyramid does more than puzzle us with stone. It unsettles us because it challenges something deeper, our story of who we are. Human history, as we have written it, is a tale of steady progress. We say that people began as hunters and gatherers, that they learned to farm, then to build, then to write, then to create civilizations. It is a ladder, each rung rising neatly from the one before. But the pyramid, silent and exact, seems to stand outside that story, a monument that does not fit the ladder at all. If the pyramid was truly built with knowledge far beyond its time, whether by a forgotten civilization or with help from something not entirely human, then our history is not a ladder, but a circle. It is a story of knowledge gained, lost, and perhaps rediscovered. The idea unsettles us because it means we are not the first. Others may have come before, walked this earth with understanding we can barely grasp, only to vanish, leaving behind whispers in stone. To accept this possibility reshapes our identity. We like to think of ourselves as pioneers, the peak of progress, the only ones who have reached such heights. But the pyramid humbles us. It suggests that we may be inheritors, not originators, caretakers of knowledge passed through the ages, fragments of a story much older than we dare to admit. It also forces us to rethink what it means to be human. If another intelligence guided us, then perhaps our myths of gods descending from the sky or teachers rising from the sea are not fantasies, but memories. If humans alone achieved such wonders, then perhaps our ancestors were far greater than we have given them credit for, their brilliance overlooked, their story diminished by our assumption of superiority. Either way, the pyramid invites us to see ourselves not as isolated, but as part of a longer, stranger continuum. Close your eyes and imagine the pharaohs walking among monuments they themselves may not have fully understood. Imagine priests whispering of the first time when gods walked with men. Imagine survivors of a catastrophe carving their legacy in stone, not for themselves, but for us. In each vision, the pyramid becomes a mirror, showing us not just who built it, but who we are in relation to it. The question is not only how the pyramid was built, but what it tells us about ourselves. Are we the first spark of intelligence on this planet, or one in a chain stretching back through forgotten ages? Is our knowledge an invention or a remembrance? The Great Pyramid forces us to confront the possibility that our identity is not as we believe, that humanity is older, wiser, and perhaps more mysterious than the story we tell. It stands in silence, not to answer, but to remind us that the story of who we are is not finished, and may have begun far earlier than we know. The desert night falls heavy and still. Stars scatter like diamonds across the sky, and the pyramids rise from the sand in quiet silhouette, as they have for millennia. They do not move, they do not speak, and yet they draw us endlessly into their mystery. Perhaps that is their greatest power, not in the answers they provide, but in the questions they leave behind. For in their silence, the pyramids act as mirrors. They reflect back to us the unknown, showing us not only the mysteries of stone and star, but the mysteries within ourselves. Each block whispers of forgotten hands. Each alignment points to truths beyond our grasp. When we gaze upon them, we are confronted with possibilities too large to ignore. That humanity's story is older than we imagine, or that we are not alone in this universe, or that knowledge itself may be a cycle, gained, lost, and gained again. The pyramids are timeless, yet they belong to no single age. The pharaohs may have claimed them, but their origins stretch beyond their names. Scholars may debate them, but their essence resists capture in words. They are not simply monuments of Egypt, but monuments of humanity, or perhaps of something more. Imagine walking closer under the moonlight. The stones glow faintly, their edges softened by shadow. You touch the cold surface and feel its weight, its endurance. In that moment, it is as though the pyramid is alive, not as a creature, but as an idea, a thought carved into reality. It does not tell you who built it. It asks you who you are to stand before it. Perhaps that is the dreamlike purpose of the pyramids. They are not merely tombs, or machines, or beacons. They are questions given form. They invite us to wonder, to stretch our imaginations beyond the boundaries of what we know. They remind us that certainty is fragile, that the unknown is vast, and that our place within it is both humbling and magnificent. Close your eyes and let the desert wind carry you. Picture the pyramids not as relics of the past, but as doorways into mystery. Their silence is not emptiness, but invitation, a call to dream, to imagine, to step beyond the narrow path of history into the wide, uncharted expanse of possibility. The pyramids may never yield their secrets. Their builders may remain forever anonymous, their purpose forever debated. But in their very refusal to explain themselves, they give us something greater than answers. They give us wonder. And in wonder lies the spark that drives us to explore, to create, to reach for the stars. So the pyramids remain, mirrors of the unknown, standing in the sand and waiting. Not to tell us what they are, but to remind us what we might become.